The courtroom was cold, not cold like winter on Earth, but cold like space itself had crept inside the walls. Stood in the center of the room with his hands bound behind his back. His uniform was torn. His face carried bruises from the guards who had brought him here. But his eyes were calm. He had made his choice and he would not take it back. Around him sat 12 judges in white robes. They were old men and women who had never seen real war. They had never smelled blood or heard children scream. They only knew politics and power. Looked at them and felt nothing but pity. An admiral stood at the front of the room. He was a tall man with silver hair and eyes like frozen water. He had been commander for 5 years. Once had respected him. That respect had died 3 weeks ago on a planet called Four. The Admiral said, his voice filling the room like poison. You have been charged with refusing a direct military order. You have been charged with insubordination. You have been charged with endangering Terran military operations. He paused and smiled. It was not a kind smile. How do you answer these charges? Lifted his head. I answer that I am guilty, he said. I refused your order. I would refuse it again. The room went silent. The judges looked at each other with surprise. They had expected him to beg. They had expected excuses and tears, but was done with such things. Admiral's smile faded. You admit that you refused to eliminate hostile elements on Four. I admit that I refused to kill 300 innocent people, said. His voice did not shake. There were no hostile elements, Admiral. There were farmers, there were old people, there were children. The youngest was 4 years old. You wanted me to burn them all because someone in intelligence made a mistake. The intelligence confirmed enemy activity in that sector. The intelligence was wrong. Stepped forward and the guards grabbed his shoulders. He did not fight them. I was there, Admiral. I looked into their eyes. They were not soldiers. They were families trying to survive. And you wanted me to turn them into ash. Admiral's face grew hard. War requires difficult choices. The war requires honor, replied. What you asked for was murder. The courtroom erupted. Judges shouted. Officers stood from their seats but remained still in the center of the storm. He had said what needed to be said. The truth was out and they could not push it back inside. It took 10 minutes for order to return. When it did, Admiral looked at with hatred burning in his eyes. The tribunal has reached its decision, he said. You are stripped of all rank and honors. You are discharged from the Terran military without dignity. You are sentenced to permanent exile on Outworld K-17. Transport will leave within the hour. I knew what K-17 was. Everyone knew. It was a frozen planet at the edge of known space. Nothing lived there except ice and wind. No ships came. No rescue would follow. It was a death sentence that allowed the military to keep its hands clean. He nodded slowly. I understand. They took him to a holding cell to wait for transport. The room was small and gray with a single light that buzzed overhead. Sat on the metal bench and closed his eyes. He thought about his life. He thought about the battles he had fought, the friends he had lost, the things he had done in the name of duty. He did not regret saving those people on 4. That choice would stay clean forever. The door opened. A young woman in a communications uniform stepped inside. Her eyes were red from crying and her hands shook as she reached for him. Mare said softly. His sister threw her arms around him and held on like he might disappear. They cannot do this, she whispered. I will talk to someone. I will find a way to stop this. There is no stopping it. Pulled back and looked at her face. She was 26 years old, but right now she looked like the little girl who used to follow him everywhere. The decision is made. You need to accept it. How can you be so calm? Tears ran down her cheeks. You are going to die on that planet, alone, in the cold. How can you accept that? Reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal pin. It was their father's military insignia, worn and scratched from decades of service. He pressed it into his hand. Because I made the right choice, he said. I could have followed orders. I could have killed those people and kept my rank and lived a comfortable life. But I would have become something I hate. I would have become like. He shook his head. I would rather die honest than live as something I am not. I clutched the pin to her chest. I will remember you, she said. Every day I will never forget. I know, he kissed her forehead. Now go, before they find you here. She left, the door closed, was alone again. 1 hour later, they put him in a drop pod and launched him toward K-17. He watched through the small window as the station grew smaller and smaller until it vanished into the black. Then there was only the cold light of distant stars. The pod shook as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Ice clouds swallowed everything. Warning lights flashed. Then came the impact, and the world turned to darkness. When opened his eyes, he was lying in snow. The pod had broken apart around him. Wind howled across an endless white landscape. Mountains rose in the distance like teeth made of ice. He was alone on a dead world with nothing but basic supplies and no hope of rescue. But he was alive, and he was still himself. He stood up, gathered what he could from the wreckage, and began to walk. The 3 weeks had passed since crashed on K-17. He should have been dead by now. The military had expected him to last perhaps 5 days, but was stubborn, and the galaxy had not finished with him yet. He had found a cave system in the mountains on his 4th day. The caves went deep into the rock, and somewhere far below, geothermal vents pushed warm air up through the tunnels. It was not comfortable, but it was enough to survive. He built a small camp near one of the vents and learned to hunt the pale creatures that lived in the darkness. They were blind things with too many legs, but their meat kept him alive. His rations ran out after 2 weeks. His thermal batteries were failing. Every morning he woke up colder than the day before, but he kept moving. He explored the caves. He mapped the tunnels. He gave himself tasks so his mind would not break. On the 23rd day, found something that changed everything. He had been following a tunnel he had not explored before. The air grew warmer as he walked, which told him there was a larger vent somewhere ahead. He hoped to find a better place to sleep, somewhere he could build a proper shelter. What he found instead was a chamber. The tunnel opened into a massive underground space. The ceiling rose so high that his flashlight could not reach it. Strange crystals grew from the walls, glowing with a faint blue light, and in the center of the chamber, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 eggs. I stopped breathing. Each egg was as tall as his chest. Their shells were not like any eggs he had seen before. They looked like they were made of dark glass mixed with metal. Colors shifted across their surface when he moved his light. Red, gold, deep purple, they were beautiful in a way that made his heart ache. In the center of the egg circle was a machine. It was clearly not natural, some kind of device that pulsed with dying light. Recognized technology when he saw it, even alien technology. This machine was meant to keep the eggs warm, but it was failing. The pulses came slower and weaker with each passing moment. And he touched one of the eggs. It was cold, far too cold. Then he understood what he was looking at. Years ago, during his officer training, had attended a classified briefing about the galaxy's most powerful species. Most of that information was above his clearance level, but he remembered one name. The Star Dragons. They were ancient beings of immense power and intelligence. They could fly through space without ships. They could breathe fire that burned hotter than stars. They rarely showed themselves to younger species, and when they did, entire civilizations trembled. Now, these were eggs. He was certain of it. The parent was gone, dead perhaps, or lost somewhere in the void. The heating machine was dying. Without warmth, these eggs would never hatch. 7 unborn dragons would freeze to death in this forgotten cave on this frozen world. They sat down on the cold stone floor and stared at the eggs for a long time. He thought about his situation. His supplies were almost gone. He was already dying slowly. If he tried to help these eggs, he would die faster. The smart thing to do was walk away, preserve his strength, survive as long as possible. But what was the point of surviving if he did nothing with the time he had left? He thought about the children on 4. He had saved them because it was right, not because it was smart. He had given up everything for strangers he would never see again. Those children were alive now because of his choice. These eggs held children too, different children, alien children, but children all the same. As I stood up, he removed his thermal jacket, the last piece of equipment keeping him warm in this frozen hell. He walked to the largest egg and wrapped the jacket around it carefully. Then he gathered dead vegetation and crystal fragments from the cave and built a small fire near the nest. Though the fire was weak, his jacket was not enough, but it was a start. He worked through the night. He created a wall of stones to trap the heat near the eggs. He burned everything he could find. He even burned pieces of his own clothing when the flames grew too low. The cold attacked his body without mercy. His fingers turned numb, his toes lost feeling, but the eggs grew warmer. When morning came, was shaking so badly he could barely stand. His lips had turned blue. Frost covered his hair, but he looked at the eggs and saw that they had changed. The colors on their shells moved faster now. Life was stirring inside. And he laughed. It was a weak, broken sound, but it was real. Well, he said to the eggs, I suppose we are in this together now. The eggs did not answer. Of course they did not, but felt something anyway. A warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. A sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. He had been exiled because he refused to kill. Now he would die trying to save lives that no one else would ever know about. It seemed fitting somehow. He added more fuel to the fire and settled in for the long wait. However many days he had left, he would spend them keeping these eggs alive. "And if I am going to die on this rock," he said softly, "at least I will die warm, and so will you." The colors on the eggs pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. They smiled and closed his eyes. The 2 months had passed in the cave, had stopped counting the exact days. Time had become a strange thing, measured not in hours but in fires built and eggs kept warm. His body was failing. He could see it clearly now. His hands shook constantly. His legs could barely carry him to hunt anymore. When he coughed, blood came up. The cold had gotten inside him and was slowly eating him from within. But the eggs were alive. That was what mattered. I had developed a routine. Every few hours, he would check each egg, feeling their shells for warmth, looking for any sign of cracking. He would add fuel to the fire. He would melt ice for drinking water. And when he had nothing else to do, he would talk. He talked to the eggs like they were children who could hear him. Maybe they could. He did not know how dragon eggs worked. He only knew that it felt right. "Let me tell you about Earth," he said one night, sitting close to the fire with his back against the largest egg. "That is where humans come from. A small blue world with one yellow sun. It has oceans that go on forever and mountains that touch the clouds. I was born in a place called Korea. It had 4 seasons. Spring was my favorite. The flowers would bloom everywhere and the air smelled sweet." Now the eggs pulsed with their strange colors, liked to think they were listening. My grandmother used to sing to me," he continued, "old songs from a time before humans went to space. She said the songs carried the souls of our ancestors. I thought that was silly when I was young. Now I think she was right." He began to sing. His voice was weak and rough, but the melody was clear. It was a lullaby about the moon and a rabbit who lived there. His grandmother had sung it to him when he was scared of the dark. Now he sang it to dragon eggs in a frozen cave on a world without a name. Somewhere deep inside those shells, consciousness was growing. The unborn could not understand words yet. They had no language, no thoughts in the way adults would recognize, but they felt things. They felt the warmth of the fire. They felt the vibration of the voice. And they felt something else, something that went beyond physical senses. They felt love. Not the word, not the idea, but the raw emotion itself pouring out of this strange, small creature who had wrapped himself around their lives. He was cold, he was hungry, he was dying, and still he gave everything he had to keep them safe. The eggs remembered this. They would always remember. Then days blurred together, grew weaker. He could no longer hunt. The creatures he had eaten before had moved deeper into the caves, and he lacked the strength to follow. He survived on melted ice and the last scraps of dried meat he had saved. I had a sister, he told the eggs one evening. His voice was barely a whisper now. She was always smarter than me, better at everything. I used to tease her about it, but really I was proud, so proud. He closed his eyes. I hope she is happy. I hope she found someone to love. I hope she forgot about me and moved on. He knew she would not forget, was stubborn like him. She would carry his memory forever, and that thought broke his heart. The heating machine in the center of the nest finally died that night. Heard it give one last pulse and then go silent. The temperature in the chamber began to drop immediately. The fire was not enough. It had never been enough. The machine had been doing most of the work. Now there was only him. Looked at the eggs, he looked at the fire. He made his decision. He crawled to the nest. Every movement sent pain through his body. His joints screamed. His lungs burned. But he kept moving. He reached the eggs and lay down across them, spreading his body over as many as he could reach. He was so cold, his skin felt like ice, but his core still held heat, the last warmth of a dying man. He pressed himself against the shells and let that warmth flow out of him. Not yet, he whispered through chattering teeth. Please, not yet, just a little longer. The storm outside grew worse. Wind howled through the cave tunnels like a living thing. Snow began to drift inside. The fire flickered and nearly died. Closed his eyes, he could feel his heart slowing down. Each beat came further apart than the last. This was the end. He knew it. He accepted it. But he would not let go of the eggs. He would keep them warm until his very last breath. I am sorry, he said to them. I really tried. High above the planet, hidden in the clouds, something massive moved. It was larger than any ship, older than most stars. It had been searching for weeks, following a trail of cold rage and desperate hope. Now it found what it was looking for, but did not see the shape descending through the storm. His eyes had closed. His breathing had stopped. His heart gave one final beat and fell silent. The fire went out, and in the darkness, 7 eggs began to crack. I descended through the storm like a falling star. She was ancient beyond human understanding. Her scales were the color of deep space, black with flickers of distant light. Her eyes held the wisdom of 10,000 years, and in her heart burned a fire that could melt worlds. She had nearly died. The poachers had come with weapons that could hurt even her kind. They wanted her eggs for the black market where rich fools paid fortunes for shells. She had killed them all, but the wounds they gave her had taken months to heal. All that time she had searched for her nest, following the faint connection that linked her to her unborn children. Now she found them on this frozen world at the edge of nowhere. She tore through the cave entrance like it was made of paper. Rock and ice exploded around her as she forced her massive body through tunnels meant for smaller creatures. She did not care about the damage. She only cared about reaching her children. The chamber opened before her. She saw the nest. She saw the dying fire, and she saw the human. He lay across her eggs, his small body stretched over the shells, his arms wrapped around them like a mother holding her young. He was not moving. His skin had turned gray. His heart had stopped. His first instinct was rage. What was this creature doing? Was it a threat? A predator? She prepared to burn it to ash and scatter its remains to the wind. But then she looked closer, and she understood. The human was frozen solid. He had been here for a long time. His clothing was burned and torn, used as fuel for the fire that now lay dead. His body had given everything it had. He had not been trying to harm the eggs. He had been trying to save them. Reached out with her mind and touched the eggs. The connection was strong. Her children were alive, cold but alive. They should have been dead weeks ago without proper heat. The heating machine she had left behind was silent and broken. This human had kept them warm. with nothing but fire and determination and his own dying body. She looked at him again. He was so small, so fragile. His species lived for less than a century. They had no scales, no fire, no power to speak of. And yet this one had done something that herself had failed to do. He had protected her children when she could not. The eggs began to crack. Life pushed against the shells from within, ready to emerge into the world. I breathed warmth into the chamber, not fire, but pure heat, the kind that star dragons gave to their young when they were born. The temperature rose instantly. Ice melted. The cold retreated. The 7 cracks became 7 openings. 7 hatchlings emerged. They were beautiful. Each one was the size of a large dog, with scales that shimmered like liquid metal and eyes that glowed with inner fire. They made small sounds, the first voices they had ever used, calling out for warmth and safety and love. But they did not go to their mother first. The hatchlings turned toward the human. They crawled over each other to reach him. They pressed their warm bodies against his frozen form and made sounds that had never heard from newborns before. Sounds of distress, sounds of mourning. They knew him. They had felt him through the shells, his voice, his warmth, his sacrifice. He was the first presence they had ever known, and now he was cold and silent. We watched in amazement. In 10,000 years, she had never seen hatchlings bond with another species. It was not supposed to be possible, connected only with their own kind. But her children loved this human. She could feel it through their bond. They loved him deeply and desperately in the pure way that only the newborn can love. She made a decision. Moved forward and lowered her massive head until her eye was level with the human's face. She reached out with her mind and found a spark. Faint, almost gone, but still there, buried deep within his frozen form. "Why did you do this?" she asked, not with words but with thought. The question flowed into that dying spark and waited for an answer. And somewhere in the void between life and death heard her. He could not see, he could not feel. He was floating in darkness, drifting toward something he did not understand. But the question reached him, and he found the strength to answer. Because they were cold," he said. His voice was just a whisper in the infinite black. "Because someone had to." I felt the truth of his words. This human had not known her children. He had not expected reward or rescue. He had simply seen lives that needed saving and given his own life to save them. Such warmth, such foolish, beautiful warmth. You humans burn so bright, she said to him. You burn so bright and then you go out. It is almost cruel. Yes, agreed, but what else can we do? We are small, we are short-lived. We cannot fly among the stars or breathe fire. The only thing we have is the choice to be kind. Understood then why this human had been exiled. His own kind had punished him for that kindness. They had sent him to die alone because he refused to harm others. And here, at the end of everything, he had proven that kindness again. You gave your fire when you had none left, she said. That cannot go unpaid. She placed her claw over his heart. Ancient power flowed from her into him, the essence of the thing that let them live for ages and cross the void between stars. She gave him a piece of it, pressed it into his frozen chest, and felt it catch. His heart began to beat. A color returned to his skin. Warmth spread through his body. His eyes opened and he gasped, drawing breath into lungs that had been still. The hatchlings cried out with joy. They covered him, pressing close, sharing their own newborn heat with the man who had given them everything. Looked up at the massive dragon above him. He should have been afraid. He should have been amazed. But all he felt was tired and warm and strangely at peace. Thank you, he whispered. No, said, thank you. The storm outside faded. Light began to filter into the cave. And in that moment, a bond was formed that would change the galaxy forever. 200 years had passed since the cave. Empires had risen and fallen. Stars had been born and died. But some stories only grew stronger with time. They sat in the great lecture hall of the Galactic Military Academy, surrounded by 300 other cadets. They came from a dozen different worlds, wearing a dozen different faces, but they all had one thing in common. They were here to learn about the alliance that had shaped modern history. The speaker at the front of the hall was not human. He stood 20 feet tall even when lowered to his speaking position. His scales were silver and gold, shifting with colors that had no names in human language. His eyes burned with ancient fire. He was one of the seven, one of the original hatchlings from the frozen cave, and he had come to tell the story himself. You have read the history, said. His voice was deep and warm, filling the hall without effort. You know the dates and the treaties and the political movements, but history is not made of paper and ink. History is made of moments, of choices, of people. He paused and looked at the young faces before him. So many of them reminded him of someone he had known long ago. 200 years ago, my kind did not speak to yours. We watched from the dark spaces between stars. We thought your species too young, too violent, too brief to matter. You burned so fast. Why should we care about creatures who lived for only a century? The hall was silent. Every cadet held their breath. And then one of your soldiers proved us wrong. I told the story. He told them about the exile, about the cave, about the dying man who gave his last warmth to eggs he did not know. He told them about his mother finding the nest and the choice she made, and he told them about what came after. Lived for another 97 years, said. My mother gave him extended his life beyond normal human limits. He was the first of your kind to walk on he learned our songs. He studied our ways, and we learned from him in return. He let that sink in before continuing. He taught us that warmth is not about temperature. It is about choice, about giving when you have nothing left to give, about protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even when no one is watching, even when there is no reward. I felt tears forming in her eyes. She had grown up on stories of the Warmth Keeper. Every human child knew his name. But hearing it from one of the seven, one of the actual hatchlings he had saved, made it real in a way she had never experienced before. Because of him, my mother broke our ancient laws. She approached your leaders not as a superior species looking down on lesser creatures, but as equals. She said that any race capable of producing deserved respect, and from that moment, everything changed. The alliance between humans and had reshaped the galaxy. 3 great wars had been ended by their combined strength. Technologies that would have taken centuries to develop had been shared freely. Human colonies now flourished on worlds that had once been thought uninhabitable. And at the heart of every temple, every sacred space, there was a statue of a man lying across 7 eggs. And passed peacefully 97 years after his rebirth, said softly. We burned his body on the highest peak of our in the traditional manner of our greatest heroes. His ashes became stars, and every year on the anniversary of our hatching, my brothers and sisters and I return to the cave where he saved us. We sing the songs he taught us, songs from a blue world, songs from a grandmother he loved. He looked directly at. She felt the weight of his ancient gaze and could not look away. You ask why the alliance matters. You ask why humans and stand together when so many other species stand apart. This is why. Because one man showed us what your kind can be at its best. Not powerful, not wealthy, not brilliant, just kind, just warm, just willing to give everything for someone else. The lecture ended. Cadets filed out, whispering to each other, still processing what they had heard, but stayed behind. She walked toward the massive dragon, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice sounded small in the empty hall. "May I ask you something?" He lowered his head until his eye was level with her face. "Of course, young one." "And is it true that he talked to you, in the eggs, before you were born?" The dragon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been sorrow. "And he told us stories," said, "about Earth, about his sister who loved him, about why humans reach for the stars even when the darkness pushes back. He sang to us in the cold. Old songs that his grandmother had taught him." He paused. "I still remember his voice. I always will." Wiped her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. She left the hall and walked outside into the station's observation deck. The stars stretched out before her, countless points of light in the endless black. Somewhere out there was a frozen world called Rest. Pilgrims visited it every year, humans and dragons alike, to sit in the cave and remember. Above the cave entrance, carved by dragon claws into stone that would last forever, were words in both human standard and script. Had memorized them as a child. Every human had. Here a man gave warmth when he had none left. Here the fire of kindness lit an age. She thought about that frozen soldier, alone in the dark, choosing to save lives that no one would ever know about. She thought about the choice he made and the price he paid. And she thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy of wonders. Somewhere among the stars, 7 ancient dragons were flying toward a frozen world. They would curl around an empty nest, close their eyes, and sing old songs from a blue planet. They would remember the warmth that saved them. The galaxy honored many heroes, but dragons never forgot warmth, and neither would humanity.